Well, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be joining you. And I'm Shelli Brunswick, and I have 4 chapters to my journey. So my first chapter is I enlisted in the U.S. Air Force right out of high school because, like many people, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't have money to go to college, so I joined the Air Force right away. I was able to go to school at night, earn my degree, which allowed me to become an officer in the Air Force, and that started my space journey. The Air Force made me a space acquisition officer. And so that started the 25-year career in the space industry. My third chapter is when I retired from the Air Force and I went to work at an organization called Space Foundation, which puts on the global premier space event every year in Colorado Springs in April. And just this year in 2024, I started my latest journey, which is starting my own company called SB Global LLC. So I'm joining you. Well, what I learned as during my journey is listening to entrepreneurs and investors and countries that are both, established countries like the U.S., but emerging space nations, emerging countries, citizens who want to be part of the space industry. Yes. And what I really learned is that I could give back more by being my own company and consulting and partnering with others like you to create more access to the space industry, create more diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm looking forward to this panel. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here.
Hi, my name is Grant Blaisdell. I'm CEO and co-founder of Copernic Space. We're the pioneering platform empowering space ventures to tokenize their assets or investments in themselves and list that on an open marketplace that democratizes, empowers equal ownership, access, benefits to space assets and the space economy. My story... I'm a musician originally. I started my first startups when I was still a teenager, originally in the digital media space. So really a lot of the models I'm applying to the space economy are variations or customizations of models and solutions I was building for digital media. A lot of these markets are going to have similar models. It's just the interface and some nuances are a little bit different. So I got to work with some, the great, amazing Hollywood studios. I'm saying that with some sarcasm. And that got me into blockchain a little over a decade ago at this point, because I viewed it as a infrastructural foundational solution to a lot of the issues that we experience in the markets. And a lot of the issues we experience in markets is in its core, it's in its foundation, it's in its infrastructure. So I viewed it, unfortunately, the music industry tends to, even being all creative and progressive, supposedly, they tend to actually be backwards when it comes to technological implementation. You saw that with the first digital revolution. Eventually, I co-founded CoinFirm. So crypto people here, you might have met me before through that, which is one of the global leading big data analytics platforms for crypto and blockchain assets. But I'm third generation aerospace. So all this story why I'm here starts with my grandfather. He helped build a national space program, the first one in Poland in the 60s and 70s. But he was a capitalistic, entrepreneurial, innovative guy stuck behind the Iron Curtain. So this company, its values are based off the first works I know of like this, his works on the idea of democratizing access to space. So those are the values, and I'm going to stop there before I go into what we're actually doing over the past couple of years.
That's beautiful. We're going to get there in a moment because you partner with one of our previous speakers, Ben Haldeman, and you have some things that are in space and moving into space. So that's really interesting. I want to get into. Now, Shelli, so I was just at the inaugural Space Power Conference hosted by Space Force, their annual event, just like all the other military branches in the U.S. have. You were in the Air Force, and as we know, the Space Force came out of the Air Force. I want to get your perspective, because you were in there, and now you're an entrepreneur. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's excellent. I think the government plays a key role in many things. And so that's what I learned when I was in the Air Force as a space acquisition officer. And so as we've seen over the last 60 years, what was the role of government? To be the payer, to be the overseer of space, low Earth assets as we go to the moon. Commercialization can take over those pieces. And we've heard that in the earlier panels, low Earth orbit. Then the government can release that risk and commercialize it. And we heard that in the earlier panels about launch vehicles. And now we're looking at LEO. How does, right now it's really hard. We heard about commercial space stations, but it's hard to be a commercial space station if you're competing with the government. And right now you have 2 governments in space, the ISS and China. So what company wants to compete with that. So that's why it's really important to create that public-private partnership where the government is supporting those commercial entities as they stand up. And then they let that go. And then they just become a customer for a service. And that's what you've seen in the launch business. Used to only be the government did launch. Now you see the government is only buying launches. They are just another customer. They're going to standardize their launch payloads so that they can fly commercial. Now you're seeing that with the commercial space stations. They're going to be just another entity that will rent space. And so we can see where the government plays a critical role. NASA, ESA, Japanese Space Agency, they're going to still play critical roles for research, for deep exploration missions. A commercial company is not going to want to do that unless there's a profit margin. So the government plays a role, but as they can turn things over, that's where they start with that public-private partnership. They start with that funding, those grants, and then eventually it becomes completely commercialized. And you've seen that somewhat with SpaceX. They still have many government contracts, but they're now also providing launch capability. And the government is the risk backer.
Speaking of, so that is a fantastic segue, and that's a great answer because we have someone that's working in the commercial sector that is moving, that's buying space on other rockets, that's commercializing space in a very effective way, through a family enterprise, through tech, through crypto. So tell us more about that.
Actually, Shelli and I were speaking before this, and we agree pretty much on almost everything. So to the thing that the government's going to be there, we're not, as Copernic Space, we're not here to disrupt or destroy that model. If anything, we're here to empower it, digitize it, streamline it, scale it up. Okay, but the end power, what's actually going to fuel the space economy is going to be you guys, to be honest. I've been in crypto for a long time. Crypto blockchain market didn't get funded by VCs. Okay, it got funded by you guys, and then the VCs came in because they saw tokens they could liquidate really fast versus 5-year timelines for the startups that they invested. Right. So what we're providing is, of course, a tool that empowers, once again, streamlines, facilitates the business processes that are already existing in space. But the holy grail is how do we transition that into the wider commercial and even in some cases the consumer market. So we really view ourselves as the commercial and financial infrastructure for the new space economy with the marketplaces and applications on top that provide the models and the connection point for you guys to be able to discover. We think there's billions of dollars in value and lost value just off the lack of discovery in space. So if I say, you want to send something to moon, where do you go? Space.com, where? Okay. So there's billions of dollars in discovery. I have space companies call me, ask me to help them find payload.
Wow.
Okay, so that's a big issue, right? Let alone for the commercial market. The other aspect that's worth even more billions of dollars is let's turn space into a transactional market. So how do we turn space into something that is scalably transactional so that there's millions of transactions happening in the space economy versus 1,000 bigger ones? Why are we utilizing blockchain tech? It's not a hype thing. We utilize tokenization as a vehicle with certain features, functions, and benefits for space assets, which we segregate into two things. Real world space assets. So this is payload, stuff that Ben's doing, satellite imagery, which I really love. If you democratize access to that, it's going to change the world, whether you like climate or you're a crazy capitalist that likes logistics and shipping, whatever it is, it's going to change the world. So those are real world space assets. Manu does IP. So space IP is totally underutilized, potentially trillions of dollars of value, not accessible. Then there's financial space assets. So how do we tokenize not just the ventures, and most of these will be securities. Okay, I have a regulatory background, but most of these will be securities. But how do we tokenize either the equity into the ventures themselves, or the model I like, which is create models so people can invest and finance into the assets themselves. Don't invest into the planet, invest into their next satellite constellation, and your token represents rights to future revenue that asset will be generating. And then you have a secondary market that you can trade that. So you remove that long event horizon for potential investors, and you totally change how liquidity and funds move throughout the space economy, and also how human beings interact with space. right? Space is the most innately like human thing. The first paintings are, space and the things I eat and kill and looking up at the stars. People need to have a tangible, incentivized ownership and stake in this economy, and that's one of the things that we're providing.
That's absolutely incredible. Around the human element of the diversity element of space, right? So in the early days, the only astronauts were male, and eventually white male, right? Eventually, we had a couple black astronauts, we had a couple female astronauts, and now we have the first all-female crew that's going up. What do you think is the role of the government in pushing DEI and enabling the space to represent all of the human race rather than one part of it?
Excellent question, because what we're doing in the space industry is we're leaving a huge margin excluded. And I talked about the government's role in risk, but that's very advanced government, the United States, the European Union, Japan. But let's talk about all the emerging nations that are not able to participate in space, because right now there's a huge development cost. And most emerging nations in South America, Africa cannot afford that. But we have a huge opportunity there to bring diversity in. So part of the thing where we agree on, and we have a lot in common, is that tokenization piece. Because when we can fractionalize space assets, capitalize on those assets, and be able to better the lives of their citizens. So as we look at tokenization, blockchain, cryptocurrency, we're now creating a pathway for those emerging nations to come in. Now, the second part you said is, how do we create inclusivity? We really have to break down some barriers. So I always look at it through my Interstellar Guide to Success, which we'll be talking about shortly. But it's about building awareness, first of all. Awareness, access, and action. That first step is we have to build awareness that there are opportunities in the space industry. Most women in diversity in the United States do not think that space is an option for them, because they think it's exactly what you said. I have to be an astronaut. There's not a lot of role models like me. I have to go to space. But you know what? Look at this room. I have blockchain. I have investors. I have media. That is what the space economy is made of. Everyone in this room, diversity, teachers, technicians, program manager, policymakers, astronauts, artists.
I'm a rapper.
And rappers. So the point is, we have to break down, this is that access piece. We have to create the awareness, then we have to break down the barriers that prevent diversity from realizing that there's a pathway, refugees, to come into the space industry. We have to create pathways of scholarships, educational programs, helping them build their networks. And then what we need to do in this room as the space industry is we need to take action at the end of the day. We need to take action and make this a reality so that space is really for all of us.
Yeah, so to those points, my co-founder is my mother.
Oh,
Yeah.
She's known, some of you might have met her even, she's known as Lady Rocket, very even more visionary and eccentric than I am, former Silicon Valley vet. We tied to Copernic Space. We have something called the Lady Rocket Foundation. We've been doing it for years. And one of the things, and why I'm bringing it up is also because it was mentioned, people think that space is, I'm not a rocket scientist, okay? I didn't go to college, for example. My grandpa was, but I'm sure as hell I'm not, okay? But that's what space needs more of. Actually, right now, it needs people that are outside of space. It needs better marketers, better salespeople. Space is not good at marketing and communicating itself. Most people don't give a shit about space. That's a failure of the space industry on how it communicates, how it markets the value that it's actually creating and providing long term. So to the action thing, to end on the action thing, Lady Rocket Foundation serves there as a vehicle all the way from youth to start building the future leaders of the space economy. Not by saying you have to be an astronaut, but by saying, hey, you like music, you like this, there's a place for it, there's a place for you, and even more, there's probably a need for you.
Once I got to the United States, all my friends had posters of rock stars and models and sports stars on their walls, which I think is structurally unsound. what would it take for us to create a paradigm in our culture where the kids put up posters of Marie Curie or Elon or scientists and engineers and entrepreneurs, people that are truly creating change in the world rather than the ones that are entertaining us? What would need to happen for us to deify and look up to the people that are like your grandfather, are the people that are truly impacting the world, and what would be the downstream ramifications of it? And that's
Quick comment from that, if I may go first. So one thing my mother's really been a revolutionary about is, and Lady Rocket Foundation fits into it, is how do we implement culture and entertainment, not in a fake surface way, but in a real way into the space economy. People need to feel a little bit like, why did rap take over rock? It's because rap is just more dangerous at this point. It's cooler. Okay, there has to be this element. No offense to anybody, we got to kind of take the nerd out of space. Okay, Musk is doing an okay job at it, but he's a nerd, right?
He did a pretty good job recently with his interview where he told Bob to go.
But that's what I mean. You need that element of danger.
Sure.
But the problem is that people only see it through Musk, who's the richest guy in the world, and they think it's a ego project of what he's doing in space. So they don't have relation to that sort of person, right? I don't know if it's going to be me, or it's going to be someone else, but there has to be someone that's relatable that can go on the block with you, smoke a blunt, then go into the space company and change the world, right? So it needs to be more relatable, is what I'd say.
In Elon's defense, he doesn't smoke that many blunts, right? He smoked one
yeah, the SEC didn't like that.
No, they did not. But I mean, I doubled my position immediately afterwards, so that was great.
But this is the reason why on our platform we're going to end up hosting 3 marketplaces. Okay, one is for real world space assets called Space Mart. Second half of this year comes the first iterations of the third one is called Space Pool, which is the financing, the investments. But the first one that we launched is called Spaceables. It's just dedicated to the culture of space. All the artists, all the creators, all the musicians needed a place like that to be empowered, to be shown, etc. And it's an amazing way to onboard people onto a platform and then transfer them into the more hardcore assets and realities of the space economy. No, stop there.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well done. Well said. Thank you.
Well, I go back to that first step of that Interstellar Guide to Success, that awareness piece. How many of you know what the Big Bang Theory is? The TV show? Okay. Kind of made space cool, even though they look like nerds. But think about it. If we had more music, more entertainment pieces that highlighted diversity in STEM careers, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and the other careers we need in space, right? We need STEM. But when we think about the space industry, it's healthcare, it's AI, it's virtual reality, it's, agriculture, it's fintech, it's the Internet of Things. And so we need to create that awareness, especially to diversity. And diversity to me is underrepresented groups in the space industry. So underrepresented groups, we have age, we have gender, we have regions of the world, and we have backgrounds. And so we need to highlight that diversity in a public forum, whether it's, TV shows, rap, commercials, the U.S. used to do things on TV, public radio, public service announcements where we highlight these career fields. Because in the United States, we have an aging workforce, and those people at NASA are retiring. Where we need to inspire the next generation. I have this new form of leadership called Global Transformational Leadership, GTL. And that first step is, a leader today has to be inspirational. Okay, so I heard from many of you, Elon Musk is inspirational. But think about it. If you're a young woman in LA, inner city LA, African American, what's going to inspire you to come into the space industry? What type of leader do you need to be inspirational? And that's the first step that we in the space community have to be. We have to be creating that awareness because we have to be authentic. We have to believe that what we're saying to people, which I think you highlighted, probably Elon Musk believes what he says, but other leaders in the space industry have to be authentic. We have to connect with people. We have to connect with those underrepresented groups, those emerging space nations. We have to connect on a personal level. And then that last step of being a GTL is being grateful. That every day you get up, no matter how that day is, like you said, maybe you lost your business, maybe it wasn't a successful day, maybe you didn't close the $1 billion deal or get the VC fund or the rap song didn't go, to number one. But you know what? Every day, no matter what, we can be grateful. So I think to change the space industry, we have to build that awareness, and we, each and every one in this room, have to be global transformational leaders. We have to inspire, we have to be authentic, and we have to have gratitude.
What do young people today, and the people that are watching from home, because we're recording this, and to all of the folks that are here in Davos, right? We have some global leaders, we have presidents and prime ministers and CEOs of Fortune 100s and investors and CEOs. What can we all do to enable the next generation to step up? Because I think a lot of people are concerned about this, right? We used to have this idea, at least in the United States, maybe not in other places, where you stepped up and went after it. Now, if you, they surveyed people in 1970 in the United States, and when they surveyed kids,
Want to be astronauts.
everybody wanted to be astronauts, right? And all the astronauts were very attractive,
Heroes.
successful, heroes, intelligent, capable. They just exuded all the things that we as a society wanted to exude. And now, the most recent survey here in the United States, as we all know,
Influencer.
everybody wants to be an influencer.
And China now is astronaut.
Exactly. So what do we need to do here in the United States to fix that?
I'm going to let Shelli go first. I have my opinions. They might not be popular, but go ahead.
So I'm going to go on to that second step of that Interstellar Guide to Success. It's that access piece. If we want to bring more diversity into the space industry, into technology, I'll even say, we have to first of all break down that barrier. And so the barrier is, in their mind, space is not for me. Space is for those other people. We have to break down that barrier. We have to present images of individuals that are different. And I'm writing a book right now, and it's covering those lessons I've learned over my 25 years in the space industry, that being a global transformational leader, and then also that Interstellar Guide to Success. And what I've done is I've interviewed 100 different leaders around the world, and I'm going to interview a few more. And here's what some of them said, and I will highlight, they were all different ages, all different regions of the world, Japan, Korea, Indonesia, the Middle East, Africa. And so what they said is, when we break down those barriers, how are we extending a hand to them and helping them into the space industry? Are we providing scholarships, right? Scholarships for education, but also scholarships to the right conferences. There are a lot of great space conferences. There are a lot of great organizations, Space Generation Advisory Council that they can join. They've got to join these networks around the world. SGAC, there's another one that's wonderful, Women Tech Network. And even though it says women, it's open to men and women to come into technology, because many times women in diversity around the world don't come into technology. So we need to create those access points by offering scholarships. We need to be doing these panels. I do about 100 speaking events a year because we need to be out there sharing the message that space is for you. So everyone in this room can go out there and talk to the student group. You can be a judge. I think you shared with me the Nancy Conrad Foundation about being a science fair judge. There are other activities you can be a judge for. There are some amazing programs around the world, CANSAT programs. So everyone who's listening today, because although we are primarily from the U.S., this is a global opportunity for organizations around the world, Organization of American States, the ISESCO, Islamic Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNUSA, the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs, Space for Women program, Space for Youth program, Space and Water programs. There are organizations that people can join that can help them find these opportunities, build these networks, find these scholarships, find grants, find opportunities to come into the space industry. And the number one thing everyone in this audience can do, because you're in the space industry, sign up to be a mentor and pay it forward. Some of them might want to be entrepreneurs. Some of them just might want to know how to be an engineer and get a job at ESA. And here's one of my favorite ones that I get from individuals from around the world. How do I eventually get to work at NASA? Because it is challenging if you're from another country to make the immigration to eventually come into the space industry, because there are some laws in the U.S. called ITAR. So everyone in this room, please find a way to mentor and help that next generation.
for those watching at home and everybody here. So I was an immigrant. I lived in a refugee camp, and I started working at NASA when I was 16. So it is possible, in spite of ITAR, only we became citizens and we had our green cards and went through the process. But it's very much possible. We have this beautiful thing in the United States around merit, where if you work your tail off, you can do what you dream of doing. Now, I want to make two shameless plugs. They aren't for me, actually. One is something that you mentioned, the Nancy Conrad Foundation. Well, it's a Conrad Foundation that she named after Pete Conrad, which is the third person to walk on the moon, who actually created the Space Lab, which is the predecessor to the ISS. And of course, coming full circle, we had the replacement for the ISS here earlier today. So for kids all around the world who are 12 to 18 years old, they have an opportunity to compete in these entrepreneurial pitch competitions where they build companies, they go on stage around the world. Once they make it through their regional competitions, their national competitions, their continent-wide competitions, they can eventually make it to Houston, NASA, where I am very lucky to be a judge. I highly recommend people who are VCs and CEOs to come be judges, provide value for these amazing kids. But you have some of the most amazing teens from around the world who spend their time outside of class, instead of going on TikTok, instead of going out and drinking, they build companies and they build a vision. And they come to NASA Houston to compete and actually get resources. And so they can get funding, they can get resources. It's pretty amazing. I think there's all sorts of resources available for the people that want to take on those challenges. And one of the beautiful things is when you look at all these brilliant kids, they come from every background. They come from multiple genders. They come from every racial background, every religious background, and every ethnic background. And it's great to see that people can come together to build things. So let's jump to you.
The unpopular thing I was going to say, it starts with the parents. I have two little kids right now, and I think big issues, especially in the West, but big issues is pretty much kind of I'm going to be a good parent, which means I'm your friend, as opposed to I'm going to be a good parent that disciplines and leads you and provides you structure while empowering you and motivating you to believe that you can achieve these sort of things. The other thing is on a different way of looking at the accessibility. It's about accessibility through multiple stages of a person's life. So with the Lady Rocket Foundation, we tend to focus, we do stuff in high school sometimes, but we tend to focus on elementary and middle school. Get them early, get them while they're young. Any great propagandist will tell you that, right? That's why, cereal companies have tigers on them, animated and stuff. Or tobacco companies have Camel, Joe Camel. But you can.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah. So is the cowboy. Alcohol brands are good at that too. But the accessibility has to go past that. It's not like, hey, I was in elementary school. They let me build my own little lander out of cardboard, put a parachute on it, and throw it from the top of the school. We do stuff like that, right? But once they get older, you need to give them different sort of access. And that's where Copernic Space comes in, right? So it's how do we empower whether I am already the entrepreneur or the company that is creating something. But on the flip side, if I am a young person and I want to have some entry point into the space economy, at least of discoverability once again, then we want to provide a platform that doesn't just do that from an educational sense, but does that from an actual participation and ownership in the space economy sense. So although we legally don't have children as paying clients for our moon mission this year, sending and tokenizing assets on the moon, we have hundreds of kids and their artworks and things like that going pro bono, going up, tokenizing them. And then on Earth, they can go and they can fundraise, do a charity auction or whatever, and say, hey, you can have ownership of our artwork on the moon, a verified lunar asset built on a standard that we worked on for years with lunar companies. And I can generate, who knows, $100,000, and we can launch our own space education program in the school.
That's absolutely amazing. So I would ask one more question before we turn it to the audience. So for the audience here at the World Economic Forum here in Davos, as well as people watching on the video, what are the things that people can do to support both of your amazing missions? What do you guys need, and how can people help?
Fantastic. Well, first of all, I'm not here for me, I'm here for you. My goal is, the reason I started SB Global LLC is so that I could do exactly what I talked about. I could reach out to those emerging nations or organizations like the Organization of American States, or work with VCs or other individuals who need to really understand how they can come into the space industry, create that strategy, the strategic engagement, build those right networks, and then have somebody who can go out there and advocate and educate on your behalf. And so that's what I do at SB Global. So I'm hoping that I can really find partners here that I can collaborate with. Like we think we have some synergy. We think we have some synergy. So it's really about how do we build a partnership? Because at the end of the day, one person, one organization, one country cannot break down the barriers to allow everyone to come into the space industry, to democratize space. We heard that earlier. We can only do that when we work together. And I want to be your partner. So thank you.
Brilliant. That's beautiful.
So Shelli and I are going to be, working together and collaborating to empower each other around this. And this enters something that actually I think kind of the crypto Web3 ecosystem is bringing a little bit to space, which is a lot more open and collaborative sort of approach in the space economy. Space is very fragmented. One reason Copernic Space is going to be very valuable is because we create a comprehensive horizontal marketplace to something that is just all these tiny little niches, and they all hide themselves from the other one, and it's all very secretive and all that stuff. And there's reasons for that. It's definitely, there's reasons for that. But I think we're crossing a certain threshold for the most part where it becomes much more of a collaborative economy. And it was talking about earlier around, community engagement. That's what I mean. You guys are going to fund this stuff. It's not going to be, there are going to be VCs funding it. I'm sure you're going to be doing stuff, etc. But you guys don't have enough capital collectively. What did we see with the GameStop situation a couple of years ago? A few people got pissed off and they collected a bunch of people. They ate the biggest hedge fund in the day. Okay, so that's the power that you actually have, right, in this world. And that's how space is going to be fueled. And we need to be better at showing actually the benefits of fueling space here on Earth. We were talking about satellite imagery later, things like that. Democratization of that will change the world. The other thing is don't do the safe thing. We were talking about moonshots earlier, and I said Silicon Valley lost its balls. Silicon Valley doesn't really like guys like me anymore. They used to love people like me. They don't really like me anymore, right?
Well, they never liked me.
Well, you and my mother will have, more. She comes out of Silicon Valley. But the point is if you're blessed or privileged or whatever, and you're in a position to actually fuel these, you might lose your money. The probability is you will lose your money. I hope that Copernic Space can provide a marketplace for more of these places, especially early stage, to get funded, commercialized, because space companies don't know how to sell well, they don't know how to market well, they need a place to be discovered and all that stuff. But my point is that if you have a position to do something and it's not you who's doing it, support the people who are being ballsy, who are being ambitious, who aren't just saying, hey, I am going to, actually support the guy who's just going to build a rocket. I'm not saying that. My point is that space now is in a unique moment in history. It's like crypto in like 2010, 11 or something like that. You have an amazing opportunity to plant your flag, right? To plant your flag in the beginning stages of what's probably going to end up being the most valuable, important market and asset class in humanity's history, right? So us as, we don't promote it, but us as Copernic Space, we take our own funds and we kind of incubate our own users and their ambitions in space. So we have 2 users that launched their own startups tied to our platform, because we built a system, a reseller system pretty much within our platform where you can build your own space business, right? So now we're building a natural organic community around the platform that is incentivized to build our business and their own business at the same time. And that's the last thing I'm going to say about space, is space needs its own models. The VC model today doesn't work well for it, okay? The governments are always going to be there, but I said that's more and more rats chasing a single piece of cheese, okay? So last thing I can really leave you on when it comes to this is it's in your hands. Okay, it's in our hands, and that is the most empowering position to have. It's scary, you know. Shelli's starting a new thing, a new venture. It's scary sometimes. Like, this isn't my first venture. I failed before. We're talking about failing. My first startups, I failed. This isn't my first. It's still scary as fucking shit, to be honest. Okay.
Is that a technical term?
Yes. That's in some NASA log. I'm sure someone said fucking shit somewhere. My point is though is that it's in your guys' hands. It's in my hands. It's in Shelli's hands. So run with it. Space is for you. It's not some distance thing, and understand that and act on it.
So amazing. Thank you both. How awesome are these guys? So let's turn it out to questions from you guys. I'm sure you guys have much better questions than I have. So go ahead.
I'm going to rewind for a quick second here. Do you remember maybe last year or the year before when NASA launched its first ever mission that I know of to destroy an asteroid or deflect an asteroid?
Yeah, awesome.
And it succeeded.
Yeah, and it succeeded, and I was like, awesome. One of my big issues with it was a silent 7-minute pause during an NFL game that they like paused, and then they went back to the NFL game, and I was with a bunch of people, and I just sat there not looking at the screen and just observing everybody's reactions. And it comes down to exactly what you guys are talking about, where a lot of times people can't relate, and communication barrier, sex appeal, so to say, access point, everything you guys have been saying has been super on point. So how do we add a sex appeal or a competition and an early access point? Because I asked a lot of those same people, you know, why did you basically get no reaction? And a lot of them are like, well, that's first off above my head. Second off, I have no relatability to that, even though it's the most relatable thing, in my opinion, in human existence, right? Like, if we have a rock slam into us, we're going to be another dinosaur. And I don't think that that's very...
What's the Bruce Willis movie? Armageddon, right?
Armageddon, right?
You got to relate to people and use terms that they get. It's like, listen, if we didn't do this and Armageddon the movie happens, you're all screwed.
Yep.
Right? Like, people, like, even myself, like, we're simple.
Right.
I have something I call Frankenstein syndrome when it comes to Copernic Space. Like, it's my creation, it's my monster. I don't perceive it how other people perceive it. And that's a big issue with space, is you're dealing with very specific people. And that's why I said the space needs marketers. It needs people who really think about how do we emotionally connect. And once again, that's why we build space schools. That's why we do Lady Rocket Foundation. That's why we do the music stuff, all these sort of things. It's like, how do we make it an actual relatable thing that they care about emotionally, not even in, you know, whatever, numbers or logic. That stuff actually doesn't matter a lot of times. Like, people ask me, well, why are people buying and sending stuff to the moon? They fucking want to.
Right.
Because they like it. It means something to them.
I think it comes down to, once we, obviously STEM is the most important thing that drives the global education, but when we get past the entry point of space exploration and space sexification of art and music, then I think science, technology, engineering, and math will follow. What is in your perfect worlds, and this is an answer for each of you, in your perfect worlds, if you're successful, what type of timeline do you see for more people to access the projects and opportunities that you're speaking of?
That's amazing. And before she answers, I think we are breaking the record for the number of F-bombs dropped at a World Economic Forum.
That's my fault,
Davos.
usually.
No, we were doing it. I heard you were on stage. I think Pablo saw the charge here, but I think it's awesome. You want to answer this question? Because it's a fantastic question.
Let me start with that, with being authentic.
Yes.
So a lot of times in the space industry, and I was guilty of it when I was in the Air Force, we talk, and my husband blames me all the time, stop talking in acronyms, stop using abbreviations. We need to communicate with people where they're at, right? Not where we think we're at. And so what we need to do is put ourselves in that other person's perspective. Like you said, you were watching a football game. I'm sure the people you were watching the game with were not thrilled that they interrupted the game for this asteroid redirect mission, right? The marketing wasn't out there to highlight how this was so important, the technology that eventually this could save our planet so we don't go the way of the dinosaurs. So there should have been marketing, and here's a perfect chief marketing officer right here. The marketing should have started far in advance.
You saw that with the astrobotic mission just now, too.
Yeah. So we need to be authentic leaders. And authenticity means we need to speak with our heart. We need to connect with people where they're at, and we need to be genuine. And when we can do that and be authentic leaders, then we build that relationship. And that takes time. It can't be stopping an NFL game to do a public announcement about a major mission that could save humanity as we know it.
Or if they do, put a 1-minute teaser before that's got a little sex appeal in it to how it's important.
Exactly. So I share with you that we need to be authentic leaders. You know, as part of being that GTL, that global transformational leader, we have to be authentic. We have to connect with people where they are. May I share one quick story? I was very good friends with the former president of Colorado State University, Pueblo, and that is a highly, primarily Hispanic school in the United States in Colorado. And he said the FBI, which is the Federal Bureau of Investigation, wanted to come to CSU Pueblo because they wanted to recruit more diversity into the FBI. And they said, here's what your students have to do. Encourage them to come. They apply for this program 2 years out, and then there's these requirements. And the president, his name is Tim Mote, he's amazing. He goes, my students are diversity, and they're lucky if they know what they're doing tomorrow. So telling them they got to apply for a program 2 years out is not going to work. He said, what you need to do is you need to connect with their professors. You need to build a relationship with their professors that they trust you, because the first thing these students are going to do is go and talk to their professors about your program. And the two FBI agents looked at each other and they said, well, maybe we are a little rigid. So what I share with everyone in this audience, if you're in the space industry, we are very rigid. We talk in acronyms. We talk about DART, redirect missions. We've got to really realize that the people that we want to connect with see things from a very different lens. They come from a very different background. And the first thing we have to do that any good leader has is we have to have empathy. And we have to connect with them where they're at. So that's kind of my thoughts.
I'll end it with one sentence. You know what what's going to actually pop it off, to be honest, is going to be our space pool. When you give people an actual economic stakeholding and incentive on whatever dollar amount they can put into it. That's unfortunately, and crypto blows up because of speculation, right? Not because they're super interested in tokenizing real world space assets. It's because there's an incentive model behind it. Yeah, and until space has an incentive model that can engage millions or potentially billions of people, it's going to be hard. But to Shelli's point, like, who knows? Like, I think certain things are going to take longer in space than people say, and certain things are going to be a lot faster.
For sure.
We need to act now. We don't have 10 years to solve this workforce challenge in the United States. We have an aging workforce.
Yeah, we'll be behind.
Japan has an aging workforce. Europe has an aging workforce. So we need to inspire women in diversity to come into the space industry, not just to be rocket scientists and astronauts, but healthcare, agriculture, energy and energy storage solutions, virtual reality, AI, all those technologies you're thinking about, those are part of the space industry. We need to connect with people and say, there's a career opportunity for you and what you're passionate about, and it also is part of the space industry. And we need to do it today because we have an aging workforce. So we either need to, find those populations in the United States, in Europe, in Japan, in Australia that don't see space as viable, or we need to look at different immigration policies for other countries to be able to come to Europe, the US, Japan, Australia, and work in the space industry. So those are kind of our two options right now.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We are out of time. We actually went over time. Let's give some time for questions. But guys, let's hear it for an incredible panel. Thank you so much.